Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us into the peculiar and poetic question of whether time, that gentle trickle of change we all feel, flows differently in other universes. But before you settle in and get cozy, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly find these quiet explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always such a joy to see all the places we gather from, each in our own little slice of time. Now feel free to dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a soft background hum, and let's gently begin our journey into time together. And if your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Let it drift. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story. Let's begin, not with stars or equations, but with something simpler. Your day. Imagine a morning that stretches on like warm dough, slow and sticky. You pour your coffee, stare out the window, and the minutes feel like they're walking rather than running. Now think of a different morning, perhaps one full of errands, traffic, phone calls, missed emails, and that feeling of the clock sprinting just a little too fast. Nothing outside you changed the pace of time, but something inside you did. Time, to us, isn't just a number on a screen or a ticking on the wall, it's a rhythm. Sometimes soft, sometimes hurried. It's the space between thoughts, the beat between heartbeats. It's what turns a glance into a memory or a pause into a moment of meaning. Time is as personal as breath, and just as invisible. Even the most basic ways we describe time betray how much we feel it. We say time flew by, or it dragged on. We say it slipped through our fingers, or that we killed it. Sometimes it stands still, other times it's running out. All of these are metaphors for something that seems objective but rarely feels that way. A second is always a second, yet we never live them equally. And this isn't just poetic exaggeration. Neuroscience agrees. The way your brain processes time is closely tied to attention and emotion. When you're alert, focused, or stressed, your internal clock ticks faster. When you're relaxed, distracted, or calm, the intervals seem longer. If you've ever waited for water to boil while feeling hungry, you've felt how elastic the seconds can be. If you've ever lost yourself in a story and looked up to find an hour gone, you've seen how time can vanish. Our bodies even have clocks of their own. The circadian rhythm, our 24-hour internal timer, responds not just to sunlight, but to food, noise, temperature, and memory. We're walking bundles of biological timers, and yet none of them explain why time feels the way it does when you're saying goodbye, or falling in love, or standing in silence beside someone who understands you without needing to speak. Time is strange like that. It's physical, yes, but it's also profoundly emotional. It bends with our moods, it loops with our memories, it slows down when we're afraid, and it speeds up when we're having fun. Children perceive time differently than adults. The elderly often speak of time as rushing past, a blur of birthdays and seasons. And if you've ever stood in front of a hospital monitor, watching the lines and the beeps, you know that every second can carry the weight of eternity. But here's the question that begins our quiet investigation tonight. If time feels different to us based on perception, if it speeds up, slows down, and even vanishes depending on the rhythms of our minds, then what does that say about the nature of time itself? Could it be that time is not a river we float along, but a fabric we help weave? Not something imposed upon us, but something we participate in creating? Before we even look to the stars, let's look inward, because the universe inside your head is already strange enough. In dreams, time becomes something else entirely. You might live out a full story, complete with beginning, middle, and end, only to wake up and find that 5 minutes have passed. Or you might fall asleep, dream nothing you can remember, and yet wake up feeling as though you've lived through something immense. The brain, in sleep, becomes a quiet magician of time. It stretches moments, skips ahead, loops scenes, or unravels them completely. And yet, it never feels broken. It just feels dreamlike. This tells us something important. Time, as we live it, is not just measured by clocks. It's stitched into the stories we tell ourselves. It's filtered through memory and meaning. A year is not just a collection of months. It's that trip you took, that song you couldn't stop listening to, that friend you lost, that evening when the sky turned orange in a way you'd never seen before. So as we continue on and begin to unfold how physics understands time and how time might behave in other corners of reality, keep this with you. Time is not just a concept. It's an experience. It's the backdrop to every feeling you've ever had. And whether it flows or not, whether it bends or breaks, it remains the thread that holds your story together. We'll get to relativity, to the multiverse, to time loops and timeless worlds. But tonight, we begin here, with the personal tick of your own awareness, the gentle rise and fall of thought, the way your breath changes as you begin to relax, because whatever time may be out there, in other galaxies, in other dimensions, it starts here, with you, and the quiet seconds unfolding softly into the next. Let's stay with this quiet feeling a little longer, the one where you're resting inside your own thoughts, wrapped in a blanket of half-forgotten seconds. Because time, at least the kind we actually live in, has less to do with seconds and hours and far more to do with memory. It isn't a river we measure, but a trail of footprints behind us, and sometimes ahead of us too. Tonight, we'll wander softly into that inner terrain, into dreams and forgetting, and the strange way time folds itself inside our minds. Think back to a dream you've had. Not necessarily a vivid one, just any night where your mind slipped into that other world. In your dream, there may have been a beginning, a sudden appearance in a place that made no sense. Perhaps you were late for something, running across a hallway that kept stretching. Maybe you spoke to someone you knew had died, or you found yourself on a beach that was familiar but somehow not yours. And then you woke up. Here's the thing. That entire story, however strange or complete, might have taken place in a matter of seconds. Neuroscientists believe that most dreams occur in the span of just a few minutes, often during REM sleep cycles that repeat throughout the night. Yet in your experience, the dream might have felt long, filled with moments, with transitions, with decisions, with events that somehow made emotional sense, even if they defied logic. This discrepancy reveals something beautiful and strange. Time in dreams is unanchored. It doesn't follow the steady beat of seconds or the tick of any earthly clock. It bends, stretches, loops, and sometimes even rewinds. You may wake up with a memory of events that seem to span hours, scenes, conversations, even journeys, and yet all of that unfolded in the brain's soft theatre in less time than it takes for water to boil. And the most interesting part, we rarely question it while we're inside it. That's because time, for the dreaming brain, is constructed from meaning, not measurement. You move from scene to scene not because time passes, but because emotion or association nudges the story forward. You remember something and suddenly you're standing there. You feel afraid, and suddenly the hallway has no end. You feel loss, and suddenly you're sitting at a table with someone who's gone. The structure of the dream follows a rhythm, just not the rhythm of time as we know it. This tells us something quietly profound, that experience doesn't need real time to feel real. Our minds are capable of producing a sense of duration, of flow, of causality, without relying on the external world to supply it. Time, in the dream, is not so much an arrow as it is a mist. And when we wake up, we often feel as though we've been travelling. Even outside of sleep, this dreamlike shaping of time continues. Think about memory. Not the mechanical act of remembering a phone number, but the way you recall a summer evening. You don't remember every second of that evening. You remember flashes, the smell of the air, the colour of the sky, the hum of a fan, the way someone looked at you. Those fragments are stitched together by feeling, by familiarity, and by your brain's gentle tendency to create a narrative, even when none exists. This is why the past feels like a place we can revisit, not because we're replaying time, but because we've constructed a map of it inside ourselves. We build our sense of time from what we remember and how we connect those memories. The spaces between events are filled in by assumptions and feelings, like ink bleeding through a page. Now imagine what that means for someone whose memory doesn't function in the usual way. For people with amnesia, time collapses, the sense of before and after erodes. Without a record of change, without memory, there's no scaffolding for time to stand on. Each moment is an island, untethered. The arrow of time becomes a scatter of points, and the self must be rebuilt moment by moment. This fragility of memory reminds us that time, at least the kind we live by, is not a given. It's a story we're constantly telling ourselves. And like any story, it can be forgotten, rewritten, or reinterpreted. Some researchers believe that consciousness itself is a function of memory, that our sense of being someone, of being here now, is built from an ongoing act of comparing the present to the immediate past. We remember where we were 1 second ago. We notice how things are changing. We feel time because we're constantly watching for what has shifted. In that sense, time might not even be something we perceive directly. Instead, we perceive difference and call it time. We notice change and assign it a direction. We compare now to before and construct the illusion of flow. This isn't to say that time isn't real, just that our experience of it, the one that rushes, stretches, loops and lingers, is a construction. And like all constructions, it can differ from one person to another, from one brain to another, and maybe from one universe to another. Because if time feels so different depending on mood, memory, sleep and age, if it's already that flexible within the span of a single human life, then what might it feel like elsewhere? In minds that evolved under different suns? In worlds where physics doesn't prioritize entropy the way ours does? In realities where light itself doesn't move at the speed we know? That's the quiet bridge we'll begin crossing soon, when we shift from perception to physics. But for now, let's remain here, just a little longer. Let's acknowledge the power and fragility of memory. Let's sit with the thought that you're not just moving through time, you are in many ways helping to create it. With every glance backward, with every choice made in light of yesterday, with every dream that feels longer than the night, time lives in you as much as you live in it. And so, we drift onward, not to answers, but to deeper questions. So far, we've wandered through the intimate elastic world of time as we experience it, from memory, from dreams, from emotion. But now, let's take a gentle step outward. Let's go to the edge of a quiet field, or onto a slowly moving train, or into the waiting stillness before a rocket launches. Because in all these places, time is still ticking, but perhaps not the way you expect. The idea that time is universal, that it ticks the same for everyone everywhere, feels natural, almost comforting. For centuries we believed it was just that, a grand clock in the sky, beating steadily, unaffected by motion or mass. It was the one thing, people thought, that didn't care where you were or how fast you were going. Then, in 1905, a quiet patent clerk named Albert Einstein disrupted that idea forever. And he did it not with heavy equipment or complex machinery, but with thought experiments. Gentle puzzles, really. Observations about light, motion, and what it means for something to happen at the same time. Einstein's revelation was, in its own way, poetic. Time is not an absolute backdrop. It's flexible. It responds to speed. And later, He'd show that it bends under the weight of mass too. Let's start with speed. Imagine two twins. One stays on Earth, the other boards a spaceship and travels near the speed of light, looping through space before returning. To the twin on Earth, several years have passed. To the one on the ship, maybe only a year or two. They reunite, and one has aged more than the other. This is not science fiction. This is special relativity. The faster you move through space, the slower time passes for you, compared to someone who stays still. It's not because your clock is broken, it's because time itself has stretched for you. You're not imagining it. It's measurable, and it's not limited to hypothetical astronauts. The effect, tiny but real, has been observed with fast-moving particles, high-speed planes, and precision clocks flown around the world. Einstein showed that time and space are not separate. They're woven together into something he called space-time. And when you move quickly, you're shifting how you experience that woven fabric. You trade space for time, and time for space. It's as if every being has their own private rhythm, ticking softly according to how fast they move. But Einstein didn't stop there. In 1915, he expanded his idea into something even more profound: general relativity. This time he asked, what if time also responds to mass? What if gravity, this quiet, invisible pull that holds us to the Earth, also pulls on time itself? And once again, the answer was yes. The more massive an object is, the slower time passes near it. A clock placed at sea level, closer to Earth's centre of gravity, ticks ever so slightly slower than a clock on a mountaintop. It's a small effect here, but near something incredibly massive, like a black hole, the effect becomes dramatic. Near the event horizon, time slows to a crawl. To an outside observer, someone approaching that boundary would appear to freeze. To the person falling in, time would seem to flow normally, until, of course, it doesn't. So we now know, time is not a constant. It's not a universal drumbeat. It bends, stretches, slows, or speeds up, depending on where you are and how fast you're moving. Time has texture. It has nuance. It's not a single story. It's a quilt of timelines, stitched together by light. And yet you've never noticed. You've never felt your time speeding up on an airplane or slowing down while walking through a valley. Because the differences are incredibly small at our everyday speeds and sizes. But they're there. Constant, quiet, and precise. Every second, time behaves differently for every person, every object, every atom. The illusion of a shared, identical time is just that, an illusion of convenience. This isn't meant to be unsettling. In fact, it's rather beautiful. Imagine a field of tall grass swaying gently in the wind. From a distance, it looks like a smooth sea. But up close, each blade dances its own quiet pattern, leaning and returning, dipping and rising. Time is like that field. From afar it feels shared and steady. But when you look closer, it's dancing differently for everyone. This realization reshaped physics. It forced us to redefine what we mean when we say something happened at the same time. Because there is no absolute now that stretches across the universe. My now may not be your now. A star, 1 billion light years away, might be experiencing a different moment altogether, even as its light finally reaches your eyes. The concept of simultaneity, two things happening at the same time, no longer holds across vast distances or high speeds. Time is local, and that changes everything. In the next session, we'll look at how this isn't just theory. You use relativity every day. Your phone's GPS wouldn't work without it. Clocks in orbit tick at a different rate than clocks on the ground, and yet everything still functions, because we've learned to compensate for time's bending nature. But for now, let's rest here, in this new awareness. Time is not one rhythm. It's a chorus of countless ticking hearts, each moving according to their own path through space-time. And somehow, in all that variance, we still find moments to meet, to speak, to say now. Even if, deep down, we're all a little bit out of sync. If Einstein's theories sound like quiet poetry, bending time, stretching simultaneity, curving the fabric of space-time, then this session brings those metaphors down to earth, or rather just above it. Because despite how abstract all of this might feel, the bending of time isn't just a thought experiment or a chalkboard sketch in a quiet physics lab. It's something you interact with every day, whether you know it or not. It's something your phone depends on, something your airplane navigates by, something the world quietly accounts for second by second so that everything keeps working, even as time itself slips and bends around us. Let's begin with something you might be carrying in your pocket, a GPS-enabled phone. When you open a map app and check your location, it seems simple enough. A small blue dot appears, pointing you toward the nearest coffee shop or the winding road ahead. But underneath that dot is a symphony of signals and clocks and corrections, so delicate and precise that without relativity the system would fall apart in minutes. Here's how it works. High above the Earth, about 20,000 kilometers up, dozens of satellites orbit silently, each equipped with incredibly accurate atomic clocks. These clocks are not like the ones you hang on your kitchen wall or wear on your wrist. They don't tick in the traditional sense. Instead, they measure the vibrations of atoms, specifically cesium or rubidium, oscillating at frequencies so stable and regular that they become the most reliable timekeepers humanity has ever built. These satellites send out continuous timestamp signals. Your phone, when trying to determine its location, listens to multiple satellites at once and calculates how long each signal took to arrive. Since signals travel at the speed of light, even a tiny difference in arrival time, fractions of a microsecond, translates into a difference in distance of several kilometers. By comparing the timing from at least 4 satellites, your phone triangulates your position with remarkable precision. But here's the catch. Those satellite clocks tick faster than the ones on Earth. Why? Because of Einstein. 2 effects come into play. First, the satellites are moving very fast, about 14,000 kilometers per hour, so special relativity kicks in and slows their clocks down a little bit. But more importantly, they are much farther from the Earth's surface, meaning they're in a weaker gravitational field. According to general relativity, time passes faster for them than it does for us here on the ground. These 2 effects aren't equal. Gravitational time dilation dominates. The net result is that a satellite's clock gains about 38 microseconds per day relative to an Earth clock. That might sound small, just 38 millionths of a second, but in GPS terms that's enormous. If we didn't account for that difference, your phone would miscalculate your location by several kilometers every single day. And that error would grow, compounding with each orbit, each misread signal, until your blue dot was nowhere near where you actually stood. So engineers do account for it. They correct for the relativistic effects, special and general alike, every second. The entire GPS system is built on the quiet acceptance that time is not absolute. It's a remarkable thing, really. Every time you get directions, find a friend's address, or navigate to the nearest late-night bakery, you're depending on Einstein's bending of time to be real, to be precise, and to be woven into the machines we trust. And GPS is just one example. High-frequency trading algorithms, climate monitoring systems, earthquake sensors, and intercontinental communication networks. All of them rely on synchronized time. And synchronization is only possible when we acknowledge that time itself behaves differently in different places. You might imagine, then, that there's some kind of true time, some master clock at the center of it all. But there isn't. What we have is a carefully maintained consensus, a patchwork of agreements. The International Atomic Time System is the closest we have to a global clock, maintained by a network of atomic clocks across the planet, each constantly compared and corrected to stay in harmony. But even this harmony requires compromise. Clocks drift, signals are delayed, gravity varies, adjustments are made. Every so often, We even insert a leap second to keep our systems aligned with Earth's unpredictable rotation. In other words, even timekeeping is a negotiation, a truce between nature's complexity and our desire for order. All of this speaks to a deeper truth. Time, as we use it in our machines and our measurements, is not a monolith. It's local, it's flexible, it's something we sculpt and maintain, carefully, delicately, and with a deep understanding that the universe isn't handing us a single ticking clock, but rather a landscape of slightly different rhythms, and still, somehow we manage to function. We land planes, we send messages, we measure eclipses and predict weather. We chart stars and detect earthquakes and launch telescopes into orbit. We do all of this not in spite of time's flexibility, but because we've learned to understand and work with it. It's humbling. We used to think time was simple. Now we know better. But instead of despairing at its complexity, we've embraced it, folded it into our tools, baked it into our circuits, trusted it to guide us through the world. And that trust, built on invisible corrections and silent physics, carries us through the noise of everyday life. It reminds us that even the most precise systems are built on approximations, that even our best clocks must adapt to the curves and quirks of space-time. So the next time your phone tells you where you are, or a plane lands on time, or a rocket reaches orbit, pause for just a moment. Somewhere in that quiet exchange between Earth and sky, relativity was at work, and your place in time, however fleeting, was gently recalculated, just enough to keep you aligned with the world around you. Now that we've seen how time bends, stretches and behaves differently depending on where and how you're moving, let's turn to a deeper question. Not how fast time flows, but why it flows at all. Because even after all our clocks and corrections, all our signals and satellites, there remains one strange and persistent feature of time that no theory fully explains. It has a direction. You remember yesterday, not tomorrow. The egg can break, but it can't unbreak. The tea cools, but never heats itself. A page tears, but the fibres never reweave. There is something pulling time forward, gently but relentlessly. That something is called entropy. Entropy is not chaos exactly, though it's often confused with it. In physics, entropy is a measure of how many possible ways a system can be arranged, how many configurations it can take. A neat stack of papers has low entropy. Scatter them across the floor and the entropy rises. There are more ways for the papers to be messy than to be neatly ordered, and so, over time, things tend toward mess. This tendency is not just a human inconvenience. It's written into the laws of thermodynamics. The second law specifically tells us that in an isolated system, entropy will always increase, or at least stay the same, never decrease. It's the reason why energy spreads out, why friction makes things heat up, why stars eventually burn out, and why nothing in the universe lasts forever in the same state. And strangely enough, it's also the reason why time feels like it has an arrow. Because without entropy, the equations of physics don't prefer a direction. You could run them forward or backward, and they'd still work. A falling ball looks just as valid played in reverse. A planet orbiting a star follows a reversible path. But when you add entropy to the story, something changes. You can't unburn a candle. You can't unscramble an egg. The movie, played backward, now looks absurd. It's this increase in entropy that gives us a sense of before and after. That lets us define past and future. That allows us to tell stories, to remember events, to feel that something is behind us and something else is ahead. In a very real sense, entropy is what makes time feel real to us. Without it, every moment would be indistinguishable from the next, and the entire concept of sequence would dissolve. But here's the strange part. The fundamental laws of physics don't care about direction. They are time-symmetric. They don't specify which way time is supposed to move. So where does this arrow come from? Many physicists believe the answer lies in the initial conditions of the universe. That in the very beginning, at the moment of the Big Bang, The universe started in a state of extremely low entropy. Why it did that is still a mystery. But given that starting point, the only direction entropy could go was up. The universe has been unravelling ever since, not because it must, but because it started from a place of extraordinary order, and as it unravels, we move forward with it. Think about the house you live in. You don't have to do anything for it to get dusty. Entropy takes care of that. Left alone, systems drift toward disorder, but if you want to reverse that, to tidy, to clean, to restore, you must input effort, you must add energy, you must impose order, and even then the order doesn't last forever. The dust returns, the heat escapes, the entropy rises again. On a cosmic scale, the same is true. The universe began in order. It will end in disorder. Not necessarily dramatic chaos, but a slow fading. A quiet, heatless stretch into equilibrium. A time when stars stop forming, when black holes evaporate, when everything levels out into the same unchanging temperature. No gradients, no energy to do work, no time left to be measured, because nothing will be changing anymore. That distant future is sometimes called the heat death of the universe. And though it's unimaginably far away, it gives us a perspective on why time flows at all. Time is a name we give to the universe's journey from order to disorder, from simplicity to complexity to stillness, from the singularity to the scattering, and along the way we find meaning in the change. We celebrate birthdays, we grow up, we plant seeds and wait for them to sprout, we say goodbye, and years later, hello again. We remember, we grieve, we learn. And all of this is only possible because the universe has a direction, a momentum, an unfolding. Entropy is not just a cold principle of thermodynamics. It is the heartbeat of time itself. Without it, your cup of tea would never cool. Your memories would not make sense. Your story would have no path to follow. But because entropy rises, there is a past to remember, a future to anticipate, and a present to feel for a fleeting moment as real and distinct and yours. Some thinkers have wondered, what if entropy didn't increase? What if you lived in a world where it stayed the same? Then time would lose its arrow. Everything might still exist, but it wouldn't move. It wouldn't change. It wouldn't develop. It would just be. A frozen tableau of possibilities, never progressing. And if entropy flowed the other way, if the universe moved from disorder to order, then time might feel reversed. You might remember the future. You might forget the past. You might clean your house by doing nothing and watch dust settle into shape. It sounds absurd, but mathematically it's not impossible. It's just not how our universe works. Our time has an arrow. Not because the laws demand it, but because our universe began in a strange, quiet place of pristine symmetry, and has been drifting away from it ever since. So when you feel the passing of time, not on a clock, but in your chest, in the way memories fade and moments stretch, you're feeling the motion of entropy, the quiet pulling of the universe toward its future, and as long as things change, time will keep moving forward, with you, around you, through you. Let's begin with a gentle image, a book, resting quietly on a shelf. Its pages have already been written, every chapter, every sentence, every comma. From the opening line to the final whisper, it all exists at once. You may not have read it yet. You may be halfway through. But that doesn't change the fact that the entire story is already there, just waiting for your eyes to move through it. Now, imagine that time is like that book. This is the idea behind what physicists sometimes call the block universe. According to this perspective, the past, the present, and the future are not unfolding events, but equally real parts of a vast four-dimensional structure. We don't move through time so much as we live along a particular path in it. All the moments you've ever experienced, and all the ones you will, exist together in this block. They don't appear or disappear. They simply are. To us, of course, it doesn't feel this way. To us, time feels like a flowing river. We stand on its banks, or maybe we're carried along by its current. The past lies behind us, the future ahead, and the present is the fragile shoreline where we touch both. But in the block universe, that sensation of flow is not a property of time itself. It's a feature of how we experience it. Time doesn't move. We do. It's a strange and unsettling idea. But it's also deeply grounded in the physics we've already explored. Einstein's theory of relativity showed that simultaneity is not absolute. Two events that happen at the same time for one person may occur at different times for another, depending on their motion or position in a gravitational field. This flexibility dissolves the idea of a universal now. Without a shared present, the past and future must also be treated differently, and so the block universe emerges as a natural consequence, a model in which all events, regardless of when they occur, exist together in the structure of space-time. In this view, the universe is not evolving, it's laid out, complete, like a sculpture, not a dance, and you're a path through that sculpture. Your birth, your childhood, the moment you learned to ride a bicycle, the time you stood in the rain listening to someone's voice as it trembled, all of these are coordinates in the block. They don't vanish after they happen. They don't wait to be created, they are already part of the structure. You're simply experiencing them in a particular order, like a reader moving through a story one page at a time. This doesn't mean that nothing changes, but it reframes what we mean by change. In the block universe, change is not the evolution of the world over time. It's the differences between various slices of the block. Each slice contains its own version of the world. Together, they form the full tapestry. What you call change is just a comparison between the page you're on and the one before it. Now, it's worth asking, if everything already exists, do we still have free will? Are we merely passengers in a frozen ride, unable to alter what lies ahead? Some find this idea deeply troubling. Others find it strangely comforting. If your future already exists, then so does your eventual peace, your joy, your reconciliation. Your growth is already part of the map, and the map is beautiful. Still, it's hard not to wonder, is this all an illusion? If the block is real, then why do we feel time flowing? Why do we live moment to moment, unsure of what's coming next? One answer is that the flow of time is a product of consciousness. Your brain experiences the present because it can remember the past but not the future. The now feels special because it's where your attention lives. But in the block, all moments are equally vivid, equally real. It's just that your awareness is lighting up one frame at a time, like a torch moving through a cave of paintings. Some theorists have likened this to a film reel. The movie doesn't change, it's already printed. Each frame sits in its rightful place. The illusion of movement comes from projecting the frames, one after the other. Your life, in this model, is the film. You, the observer, are the projector, and perhaps, just perhaps, that's enough. Because even if the story is written, it still matters that you're reading it, that you feel each word, that you laugh at the right parts and pause at the ones that hurt. The experience of time, whether or not it's real in some ultimate sense, still shapes who you are, still defines what it means to love, to hope, to remember. So maybe the block universe is not a prison, but a cathedral, a structure where every moment, sacred or small, holds its own place in the architecture of being. Your life is not slipping away. It is unfolding exactly as it must, and all the moments you've yet to live are already there, waiting to meet you, like pages of a book still warm from the press. You don't need to race ahead. The next sentence will arrive, and so will the one after that. One breath at a time, one heartbeat, one thought, softly arriving on the edge of now. And when the story is done, it will still exist. The you that began will always be, and so will the you that ends. and everything in between will stay exactly where it belongs, in a universe where time may not flow, but meaning still does. Let's drift deeper now, into the stillest part of the question. So far we've followed time as a feeling, as a rhythm, as something shaped by clocks and softened by memory. We've seen it bend near black holes and flicker like pages in a book already written. But here we arrive at a stranger place. A place where time doesn't just behave differently. It disappears altogether. It's hard to imagine a world without time. After all, time is what lets us tell stories, trace changes, understand causality. Without it, how would anything happen? But physicists studying the universe, at its most fundamental level, have run into a curious silence. They've built equations to describe everything: gravity, energy, quantum fields, and sometimes, unexpectedly, time doesn't show up at all. One of the clearest examples of this is the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, an attempt to combine quantum mechanics with general relativity, to describe in a single breath the behaviour of the entire universe. This equation doesn't include a time variable, not as a mistake, not as an oversight, but because, in the framework it describes, time doesn't need to be there. To understand why this matters, we have to gently lift a few layers of abstraction. In classical physics, time is everywhere. It's the background against which everything happens. Newton saw time as an absolute framework, a shared river flowing at a constant pace, unaffected by the actors within it. But as quantum physics grew and general relativity curved the very fabric of space and time, that picture began to crack. General relativity treats time as a coordinate, something that can stretch or contract depending on motion and mass. Quantum mechanics, on the other hand, describes particles in terms of probabilities, evolving over time according to the Schrödinger equation. But when you try to unify the two, to describe a system where space and time are quantized like particles themselves, something odd happens. Time vanishes. The Wheeler-DeWitt equation is one such attempt at this unification. It describes the quantum state of the entire universe, not just a particle or a galaxy, but everything. And in doing so, it doesn't refer to time as a backdrop. There is no before or after. There is only the totality of states, coexisting, unchanging, timeless. That's difficult to picture, because for us, motion is life, change is identity. Even thinking feels like something that happens in time. But the math suggests that time, as we experience it, might not be built into the deepest layers of reality. It might emerge later, like a pattern in a painting, only visible when you step back and squint. Some physicists believe this timelessness isn't a flaw, but a clue. That time, far from being a fundamental part of the universe, is something that appears only when certain conditions are met, like temperature, which doesn't make sense for a single atom, but arises when many particles move and interact, or like waves on the ocean, beautiful, rhythmic and real, but only present when the sea is deep enough and stirred by wind. Time, then, may be a kind of statistical illusion, a byproduct of complexity. When we observe subsystems, or when observers like us emerge within the system, time becomes a useful way to describe relationships between states. But zoom out far enough, or dig down deep enough, and the flow disappears. This idea is known as emergent time, and it suggests something profound, that the universe doesn't tick unless there's something inside it to do the ticking. That time is not something out there pressing forward. It's something we generate simply by being here and observing change. You could think of it like music. If you were to see a sheet of music without knowing how to read it, it would just be ink, a set of marks. But when someone plays it, when sound is unfolded into air, then the rhythm appears, then time is felt. The music doesn't require time on the page. Time appears in the performance, in the hearing, in the experience. So too, perhaps, with the universe. When you look at the cosmos as a whole, frozen in its totality, time disappears. But when you step inside, when you watch one part relative to another, when you remember, when you change, that's when time awakens. It's humbling, isn't it? The idea that time might not be something handed down by the universe, but something stitched together by our interactions. That we are not just travellers through time, but creators of it. That every act of observation, every memory, every shift in awareness spins time into being. This doesn't mean time isn't real. It just means its realness is conditional, local, dependent on context, like the warmth of a campfire, undeniably felt but not present in the logs or the flame alone. And perhaps, in some strange way, that makes time more precious. Because it isn't something guaranteed. It isn't woven into the void like a grid or a script. It's something that happens only when things are capable of noticing each other. Only when there's something that can change, and something that can remember that it did. In a timeless universe, everything is still there. But without someone to experience it, there's no before or after, no story, no music, just the silent possibility of both. So, as you listen now, your thoughts slowly unfurling, your breath a little deeper, remember that your awareness of this moment is part of what makes time real. You're not just in the present, you're helping create it, and in doing so, you've lit a tiny spark in the great stillness, a spark that flickers, a spark that moves, a spark called now. Let's imagine for a moment a world without memory. Not just forgetfulness, not the absent-mindedness of losing your keys or walking into a room without knowing why, but a total absence of record. A world where nothing remembers anything. Where cause and effect blur into one long moment without punctuation. Where there are no traces left behind. No footprints, no ripples, no echoes. Would time still exist? This is a question physicist Carlo Rovelli likes to ask. To him, time is not some external drumbeat, ticking away in the background of the universe. It's not an invisible river carrying all things forward. Instead, he suggests, time is a way of tracking change, noticing difference, comparing what is with what was. Without such comparisons, without memory or contrast, the notion of time becomes strangely meaningless. Rovelli's view is that time is not fundamental, it's relational. It doesn't exist on its own, like a road waiting for someone to walk down it. Rather, it emerges when things interact, when particles shift, when systems evolve, when states differ enough that we can say, this came after that. Time, in this sense, is the shadow of change. But for change to be recognised, it must leave a mark. It must be recorded. Think of your life, not as a continuous stream, but as a series of remembered differences. You don't recall every heartbeat, every blink. You remember events, moments that felt different from what came before. That difference, that imprint, is what gives time its shape in your mind. A growing child doesn't feel taller day by day, but one day they can reach the shelf they couldn't before. That memory of contrast, of now versus then, is time, stored inside a person. Your brain is a magnificent archivist of these contrasts. It doesn't record the world like a camera. It compresses, selects, organises. It highlights beginnings and endings, emotional peaks, surprises. Your memory isn't a timeline. It's a storyboard, assembled from fragments that mattered. And without that storyboard, time collapses into a featureless now. We see this in certain neurological conditions. Patients with severe amnesia often lose not just events, but the sense of sequence. Without memory, there is no sense of before or after. They live in a perpetual present, reactive, aware, but unanchored. The moments still occur, but they do not accumulate. There's no scaffolding to support a flow. This isn't just a human problem, it's a cosmic one. In Ravelli's view, the universe keeps time by keeping records. When a system changes in a way that leaves an irreversible mark, when a snowflake melts, when a vase shatters, when a star collapses into a black hole, that's when time is written. Not in clocks, but in consequences. Imagine a page. If nothing is written on it, it has no memory. It could be from any book, any chapter. But once ink marks it, once a word is laid down, it becomes a part of a story. The ink is irreversible. The letters are a change that cannot be undone. The page has been altered, and that alteration stores a tiny fragment of time. Now, imagine the universe as a vast book, mostly blank, being slowly written by interactions, by entropy, by events that cannot be reversed. Each new ink blot adds structure, meaning, direction. The book doesn't need a timeline. It is the timeline. This vision doesn't mean time isn't real. It means time is contextual. When you zoom out far enough, time becomes harder to define. But within a system, within a memory, a planet, a person, it pulses gently into being. You might think of it like music again. The notes themselves don't require time to exist, but the spacing between them, the contrast, the silence, the rising and falling, is what creates melody. Without change, without variation, the song vanishes. A single sustained tone contains no rhythm, no movement, no time, and so it is with the universe. We notice time when things vary, when coffee cools, when clouds shift, when someone speaks your name and you remember how it sounded the last time. These are not just changes, they are stored changes, differences that linger long enough to matter, long enough to be perceived, processed and passed on. In that way, you are not just a passenger in time, you are a librarian of it. Every memory you keep is a page in the universe's ongoing journal. Every story you tell is a sequence rescued from the formlessness of pure now. Your life is not just lived in time. It is a vessel that gathers and shapes it. Even forgetting plays a role, because to remember everything would be to erase contrast. Without forgetting, you could not notice what's new. Without erasure, nothing would stand out. Memory needs blankness to give its moments meaning. So time is not just what we remember, it's also what we forget. And in this delicate balance between change and record, between memory and erasure, time takes on its familiar texture. The rush of youth, the slow pace of waiting, the timelessness of joy, the weight of grief. These are not durations measured in minutes. They are qualities shaped by memory's peculiar alchemy. Perhaps that's why some days feel long and others vanish. Not because time moved differently, but because your mind recorded more, or less. Time is not only in the world, it's in you, in what you notice, in what you choose to carry. So if time is not a universal constant, but a local story, told by systems that can remember, then perhaps the universe didn't begin with time. Perhaps time began when something could first change, and notice that it had changed. When difference began to matter, when contrast began to accumulate, when the first page, however faint, held the first mark. From then on, the book began to grow, and you are part of that story. A living chapter, a moving page, a keeper of change, a gentle ripple that carries memory across the sea of being. Let's gently open a door now, not to a new room, but to an entirely different universe, one with different rules, different rhythms, and perhaps a different sense of time. As we cross the threshold, we don't hear a bang or feel a jolt, just a subtle change, like stepping into a song with a different tempo, a rhythm unfamiliar to our own, but steady in its own logic. The idea of the multiverse is not a singular theory, but a family of suggestions, each one imagining that what we call the universe might be just one bubble in a vast cosmic foam, one reality among many, one story written in a library where the books never end. Among the many versions of this idea, physicist Max Tegmark proposed a layered model. He called them levels 1 through 4. Like floors of an impossibly tall tower, each level suggests a broader sense of what might be out there. We need not go through each floor in detail, but let's linger for a while on level 2. In this model, cosmic inflation, an idea born from the early moments after the Big Bang, never fully stops. Instead, it keeps bubbling off, creating pocket universes, each with different physical constants. In some, gravity might be weaker. In others, electrons might be heavier. And in some, time itself may flow. Strangely. Because the rules that govern how things interact, the very fabric of space and time, depend on these constants. If the speed of light changes, or if quantum events unfold faster or slower, then time as we know it is no longer recognisable. The clock in such a place might not tick, or it might tick too quickly, the seconds dissolving before anything can notice them. You might walk through one of these universes and find that every thought finishes before it begins, or that nothing ever changes, that no story can unfold because time is so slow that evolution, motion, even decay never have a chance to bloom. Or perhaps you'd enter a world where time isn't one thread, but many, layered like pages in a book someone is reading all at once. In some of these worlds there might be no stable concept of cause and effect. An action might precede its intention, a decision might echo backward, and still, to the beings within, it might all feel perfectly ordinary. We tend to think of time as something universal, not just in our world, but in any world. But that's because we've only ever known one kind of rhythm, ours, the kind marked by decay and heartbeat, by sunset and memory. But there could be other tempos, slower than stone, faster than lightning, tempos that make sense in the context of alien rules, and perhaps, in some of those worlds, clocks are meaningless. Here, a clock isn't just a device, it's a metaphor for regularity, for change we can measure and agree upon. But in a universe where particles don't decay predictably, where light moves differently, or where entropy doesn't increase at all, then even the idea of a tick might not emerge. Imagine a world where nothing ever fades, where nothing ever warms or cools, a world where events don't sequence but simply coexist. There, time wouldn't be absent. It would be unwritten, unfelt, unneeded. And yet, perhaps someone, something, might live there. A consciousness shaped not by cause and effect, but by a kind of eternal awareness. A being that doesn't remember or anticipate but simply is. Existing as a pattern in space, not a sequence in time. These ideas may sound fantastical, but they're not mere fiction. They arise naturally from the mathematics of cosmology and quantum theory. If the constants of nature can vary, and there's good reason to believe they can, then so too can the ways that time unfolds, or fails to. Even within our own universe, we see hints of time's flexibility. Near black holes, time slows. In the early universe, time behaved differently. At the quantum level, time is not always clear, so it's not a great leap to imagine entire universes built from different rules, different sequences, or none at all. Would you know time if you saw it in one of these places? Would it still feel like motion, or like stillness? Would it taste like anticipation? Would it leave a memory or a scar? Or would it vanish entirely, replaced by something else? Something beyond our words. A rhythm not of tick and tock, but of transformation too slow to track or too fast to catch. A being who lives for what we would call a second might build an entire civilization in that flicker. A world where everything happens at once might have no need for past or future. Just the undivided totality of now. In our world, we need clocks. We need sunrise and sunset, heartbeat and breath, calendar and memory. But that's because we're made of this world's rules. Our neurons fire at this speed. Our atoms decay at this rate. Our awareness moves through this particular stretch of space-time. In other places, those needs may not arise, or they may take on forms we cannot imagine. A tree might grow backward. A planet might age without changing. A voice might echo before it's spoken. The multiverse is not a promise, it is a possibility. But within that possibility lies 1,000 forms of time, some recognizable, some deeply alien, and all of them perhaps are valid. All of them are attempts by reality to express itself, not in one melody, but in a chorus of cosmic tempos. And in that choir, we are one note. We hum at the pace of stars and shadows, of dreams and decaying atoms. But somewhere, far from here, another note might ring. A time we cannot hear, but that still exists, still waits, still counts, in its own unknowable way. Let's step now into a corridor where the air feels just a little heavier, and the floor beneath you might lead back to where you began. This is a place where time doesn't stretch forward in a single line, but curves quietly back on itself, like a soft echo in a canyon that never quite fades. Welcome to the world of time loops. In our daily lives, time feels like a one-way road. We move from the past into the future, carried by a current we don't control. But not all solutions to Einstein's equations obey this simple rule. Some describe universes where time is not linear but circular, where the future and the past are not separate places but neighbours, sometimes even mirrors of one another. One such possibility was discovered by the mathematician Kurt Gödel in 1949. He imagined a rotating universe, a strange spinning cosmos where the fabric of space-time bends in just the right way to allow something extraordinary. Closed time-like curves. That's a technical phrase, but its meaning is quiet and astonishing. A time-like curve is simply a path through space-time that a person or object can follow without breaking the speed of light. A closed time-like curve is one that loops back on itself, which means, in theory, a person could follow this path and arrive back at their own past. In Gödel's universe, you could board a spaceship, take a long enough journey in the right direction, and find yourself returning to the moment you left. Not because you reversed speed or time itself, but because the very shape of the universe wrapped your future into your past. This idea raises countless questions, both scientific and personal. Would the world you return to still be the same? Would it recognize you? Would you be allowed to change anything, or would you simply become part of the story that was already written? In fiction, we imagine paradoxes. The person who meets their younger self, the traveller who prevents their own birth, the loop that undoes itself by existing. But in physics, paradoxes are less about contradiction and more about consistency. If time loops exist, they must be self-consistent. You could go back, perhaps, but only if you always did. You would not break the past. You would fulfill it. There's something strangely poetic about that. Imagine a day that repeats, not because of some curse or magic, but because the structure of the universe curls in such a way that, when you reach the end, you return to the beginning. Not in memory, not in ritual, but in reality. The sun rises on the same day. The words spoken are the same, but perhaps your awareness shifts, growing with each return, even as the world forgets. This is more than a story device. It's an idea grounded in math. Closed time-like curves are not forbidden by the equations of general relativity. They are exotic, yes, and they require unusual conditions, rotation, negative energy, or wormhole-like geometries. But they are possible, allowed in theory by the very rules that govern gravity and light. And so we must ask, if such loops exist, what would it mean to live within one? Would life feel like déjà vu, stretched across eternity? Would identity fray, knowing that everything you do has already been done? Or would you find peace in the rhythm, knowing that no mistake is final, no goodbye is forever, no joy is truly lost? In ancient cultures, time was often seen as cyclical. Seasons returned, lives reincarnated. The same stories were told under new stars. Our modern sense of time as a straight arrow is recent, shaped by clocks and calendars and progress. But in the looping universe, the old myths return with new relevance. Perhaps we are not moving forward at all. Perhaps we're dancing in a circle, tracing patterns too large to see from the inside. And if that's true, if some universe out there does fold time into a loop, what kind of beings would live there? Would they plan as we do? Would they long for change or find comfort in the familiar? Would they write stories or simply remember them? Could you fall in love in a loop again and again, never tiring of the moment it first began? Would you ever choose to leave? Or would the loop itself become a kind of sanctuary, a place where nothing is lost because everything always returns? These are quiet questions and perhaps unanswerable, but they remind us that even the structure of time, so solid in our hands, so predictable in our lives, might be more flexible than we ever imagined. And though Gödel's universe may not be ours, its existence as a mathematical possibility invites wonder. It tells us that the universe does not forbid time loops. It simply does not seem to use them, at least not in the part we inhabit. Still, some physicists explore the fringes of reality. Wormholes stabilized by exotic matter. Hypothetical paths that bend space-time like paper folded into impossible shapes. These paths too could connect past and future, not by magic, but by geometry. Whether they are real or only beautiful fictions written into the equations, they stretch our imagination. They offer us new metaphors for what it means to move, to return, to repeat. And in a way, perhaps we already live in small loops. Every breath is a cycle. Every morning is a return. Every memory is a circle, closing again on the self who once felt it. We are not strangers to repetition. We are made of it. And so, when we imagine time looping back, not as a trap, but as a spiral gently drawing us inward, we are not so far from home. We are simply listening to a rhythm deeper than clocks, a rhythm that hums in the curves of space, a rhythm that might, somewhere, bring you back to the beginning, not as you were, but as you have become. Let's drift now into a stranger silence, a universe so unfamiliar that even time forgets which way to go. Not because it loops, or rushes, or stretches, but because it doesn't point at all. There is no arrow, no direction, just a landscape of events, unordered and adrift, like stars scattered on a dark canvas with no map to bind them together. In our world, time has a clear arrow. It points from the past to the future, carried along by the rising tide of entropy, the tendency of systems to become more disordered over time. Ice melts, wood burns, milk mixes into coffee. These changes are irreversible, and their irreversibility is what gives us our sense of before and after. But what if entropy didn't increase? What if the universe had no built-in bias toward disorder, no natural drive to mix, to decay, to spread out? In such a place, the arrow of time would dissolve. There would still be motion, perhaps, still be change. But that change wouldn't have a direction. Events might still happen, but their order would be arbitrary or even meaningless. You might remember the future and forget the past, or remember neither, or both. Or, more unsettling still, you might not be able to define memory at all. Some physicists and cosmologists have seriously explored this idea. Certain versions of the multiverse, or even symmetric solutions to our own universe's early conditions, suggest that a reality without an arrow is not only imaginable, but mathematically plausible. In such a world, the equations of motion remain valid. The math still works, but the distinction between cause and effect, between why and when, begins to blur. A cracked window might precede the thrown stone. A sigh might come before the ache. Or perhaps the ache and the sigh simply coexist, each informing the other without hierarchy. It's difficult for us to picture this. Our brains are wired to extract sequence, to tell stories. We depend on the flow of time not just to survive, but to mean anything at all. Our memories are built on order. Our languages, our thoughts, our emotions, all lean on the idea that something comes after something else. So, in a universe with no arrow, how would a being like us even think? Would there be stories, narratives? Would words still form sentences? Would meaning still accumulate? Perhaps not. Perhaps such a being would experience all of its moments at once, not in a blur, but in a stillness, not in confusion, but in completeness. Imagine a consciousness like a prism, holding every colour of time at once, with no need to rearrange them. Every memory, every anticipation, every instant, stacked like glass sheets, fully seen, yet never touched. Would such a mind feel regret, hope, boredom? Or would it live in a kind of eternal now, not the fleeting now we know, always slipping into what's next, but a still now, unmoving, unbroken, untouched by change? It's hard to say. And maybe that's the point. Because when we imagine a universe with no arrow of time, we are brushing against the limits of our imagination. Not just because the physics is abstract, but because the experience of directionless time is foreign to the very machinery of our minds. We are time-bound creatures, and our thoughts are woven from thread. Pull the thread apart and the thought may vanish. But even here, even in this hypothetical world with no before or after, there might still be beauty. Not the beauty of a journey, but of a pattern. Not of a story, but of a mosaic. A life that doesn't unfold, but simply exists, whole and untouched, like a snowflake caught before it ever falls. And if someone, something, could drift across that mosaic, could see its shimmering parts without needing them to align, perhaps that being would see truths we never could. Not progress, not history, but essence. Of course, this is all speculation. Our universe does have an arrow. Entropy increases. We remember yesterday, but not tomorrow. The arrow of time may be the result of initial conditions, as some suggest, or perhaps of quantum decoherence, or boundary conditions at the edge of the cosmos. No one knows for sure. But imagining universes without it helps us see our own more clearly. It reminds us that time is not a guaranteed feature of existence point. It's a contingent one, a gift, not a rule, a path we can follow because the structure of our universe allows it. And even in our universe, time may not be as rigid as it seems. There are theories, deep in the mathematics of quantum mechanics and cosmology, that suggest the arrow of time might not be global, that in some corners of the cosmos it might point differently, that two regions of space might remember in opposite directions, that time, like gravity, might be local, a matter of perspective, not a universal decree. It's a humbling thought, because it means that what we take as absolute, this forward drift of days and decades, may be just one version of possibility, one way to be among many, and that beyond the veil of our perception, there may be worlds where stories are not told but held, where memories are not behind you but beside you, where time does not guide but simply is. So if you ever feel lost in time or trapped by it, know that it's not the only shape the universe could have taken. Ours happens to flow, but elsewhere time might stand still, or ripple in all directions, or remain unwritten, like a silence that contains all possible songs. And in imagining those other rhythms, those alien timelines, you may find a deeper appreciation for your own. Because the arrow that points you forward, the memory that tugs gently backward, the fragile sense of now that holds you in place, these are not flaws or constraints. They are the texture of being alive, the soft whisper of motion in a cosmos that could, so easily, have chosen stillness instead. If you look up at the night sky, truly look with stillness and patience, you're not just seeing stars, you're seeing the past. Each point of light above you is a message, a whisper sent across impossible distances, carrying with it the signature of a moment long gone. Some of those stars may no longer exist. Some may have lived and died while your ancestors were still learning to shape fire, and yet their light has only just reached you, softly, quietly, without urgency, like a memory that took a detour through time. Light, in our universe, is more than illumination. It is a courier, a time traveller, a memory in motion. This is because light doesn't move infinitely fast. It moves at a very specific speed, about 300,000 kilometers per second. That's fast enough to circle the Earth more than 7 times in a single second. But when you stretch your view beyond Earth, into the vast emptiness between stars and galaxies, that speed becomes something else. It becomes delay. It becomes distance made visible in time. When we say a star is 10 light years away, we mean that its light has taken 10 years to reach us. We don't see it as it is now. We see it as it was 10 years ago. The farther we look, the deeper into the past we peer. Our telescopes are not just tools of sight. They are tools of memory, built into the very structure of space-time. And then there is the faintest, most ancient light of all, the cosmic microwave background, or CMB. This dim, static glow fills the sky, but not with colour or shape. It's the residue of the universe's infancy, the afterglow of the Big Bang, released when the cosmos was just 380,000 years old. Before that, the universe was too hot, too dense, too chaotic for light to travel freely. It was an opaque fog of particles and plasma, but when things cooled enough for atoms to form, light was released into the openness, and it's been travelling ever since. When we detect the CMB today, we're not just looking at something old. We are looking at the oldest thing we can possibly see, a baby picture of the universe itself, a photon that began its journey more than 13.8 billion years ago, bouncing through expanding space, untouched, unaltered, until it found its way into a telescope, or maybe into your microwave as a tiny flicker of noise. It's strange to think that the past is not just remembered, but physically present, drifting to us in the form of light. We don't have to imagine what the early universe looked like. We can see it. Not in the way you see a photograph printed and held, but in the way that a shadow on a wall reveals the shape of something you can't touch. Light gives form to history. It allows the past to stay visible, if only you know how to look. Even the stars in your own night sky are records of what once was. The sun, though close by cosmic standards, is already 8 minutes old by the time you feel its warmth. The light that lands on your face at noon began its journey when you were still finishing your morning tea. Every beam of sunlight is a delayed greeting from the past, and so, in a very real sense, every second of your life is accompanied by echoes. Photons are in some ways perfect messengers. They don't age in the usual sense. They have no rest frame. They don't experience time as we do. From their own perspective, their entire journey from source to destination is instantaneous. A photon born in the furnace of a star and arriving in your eye billions of years later experiences no delay. To it, the beginning and the end are the same moment, and yet, from your perspective, that same photon has carried across eons. It has endured expansion, drifted past galaxies, slipped through dust and darkness to find you, here, now, thinking quietly about what that means. This is not just poetic, it's how science reads the sky. Astronomers decipher light the way historians decipher ink. The colours of a galaxy's light tell us how fast it's moving. The stretch of its spectrum tells us how far it's gone. The brightness, the flicker, the pulse. All of it is a form of memory, carried across the void at light speed, unpacked by minds that know how to listen. And when we think about the shape of time, the experience of time, we must remember that much of it comes to us through light. Without light, we wouldn't know how old the universe is. We wouldn't know about galaxies or stars or even the Earth's orbit. We would be blind to our own history, not metaphorically, but literally. The past would remain past, unreachable, unlit, unremembered, and we, in the dark, would be left to guess. But we are not left to guess. We have light. It arrives late, but it arrives. And in that lateness we find something beautiful. We find that we are always surrounded by yesterday, that the sky is a tapestry of ancient thoughts, woven in brightness, sewn with patience, that your eyes are not just for seeing now, but for welcoming then. So when you look up at night, remember that you're not looking out, you're looking back, into the long memory of the cosmos, into a story still unfolding in reverse, one photon at a time. We've spent time with the light, those quiet travellers that stitch the past to the present, that carry the memories of stars and the whispers of ancient fire. But now, let us gently imagine something else. Not a darker world, but a quieter one. A universe where the ink of light never quite sets, where memory fades before it reaches any eyes. A place where the story tries to tell itself and dissolves before it can be heard. In our universe, light is history. It carries structure, evidence, beauty. Without it, we wouldn't know the age of the stars or the shape of distant galaxies. But this is because light in our universe can travel, unimpeded, often for billions of years. The vast emptiness of space, though not entirely empty, is transparent enough to allow photons to make their journey mostly undisturbed. But that isn't true in every possible universe. Physicists have considered models of alternate realities where light doesn't get far, where space is more crowded or more opaque, where interactions between particles are so frequent, or where the vacuum itself is so chaotic that no beam of light could cross the gulf, where photons are constantly absorbed, scattered, pulled into strange loops, unable to deliver their messages. In such a place, the stars might shine, but no one would see them, not because there were no eyes, but because light would never arrive. It would vanish before it had a chance to tell its story. You could imagine living in such a universe and never knowing what lies beyond your atmosphere, or even a few meters beyond your skin. You might see only what touches you directly. You might hear nothing from the past except what lingers inside your own mind. The universe would still exist, but it would be self-hidden, folded in on itself, full of colour no one could see. And history, in such a world, would be terribly fragile. Without light, memory becomes local. Events cannot echo across space. There are no messages in the sky, no traces on stone, no fireflies of information drifting from one mind to another. Every change would begin and end in place. A thought might arise, but it would vanish unless someone nearby caught it. A star might die, but its death would be as private as a dream never spoken. This is more than poetic speculation. It touches something deep in the physics of how information behaves. In cosmology and quantum theory, the ability to transfer information is what allows complexity to build. Systems need to retain and transmit signals. Patterns must survive. Memory requires durability, not just in the brain, but in the very materials of the cosmos. And when we think about time, we often assume that its passage is enough, that simply moving forward creates history, but it doesn't. Time without memory is indistinguishable from stasis. Without something to carry the change, without something to remember that the change occurred, then nothing accumulates, nothing evolves, nothing lasts. In this sense, light isn't just how we see the past, it's how the past survives at all. If photons couldn't travel far, the universe would lose its voice. It would still hum with quantum fluctuations, still bubble with particles, still bloom and burn. But no part would know what any other part was doing. There would be no coordination, no awareness, no unity of experience, and perhaps no consciousness. at least not as we understand it, because memory, awareness, identity, all of these things depend on the ability to relate one moment to another, not just to feel change, but to remember it, to weave it into a tapestry of thought. And without light, or something that behaves like it, those connections begin to fray. Imagine writing a sentence in ink that evaporates before the word is finished. Imagine trying to learn from a book whose pages fade the moment you turn them. A life like that might exist, but would it remember itself? And yet, there's something delicate, almost tender, about such a universe. It would be full of firsts because nothing would last long enough to become second. Every perception would be fresh, every interaction singular. There would be no repetition, no pattern to follow, no tradition to inherit. Only the shimmering now over and over, never seen twice, never told again. But we don't live in that kind of world. We live in a universe where light lingers, where photons persist, where a star's death, though long past, can still bring colour to our night sky. We live in a universe where the ink does dry, slowly, across space-time, where stories can be kept, where history has a direction and memory can be shared. And perhaps that's why we love to look back, not just in astronomy, but in our own lives. We treasure photographs, we revisit conversations, we keep journals, collect letters, restore paintings. We are creatures who hoard memory, who polish the past and replay the same songs. Because somewhere inside us we understand how rare it is, how precious it is that the light survives, that it reaches us at all. So the next time you see a ray of sunlight catch in a dusty room, or a star twinkle just before dawn, take a moment to wonder, not just at what it reveals, but at the miracle that it arrived, that this photon, this tiny thread of history, survived the silence of space to find its way to your eye. Because somewhere, in some universe, the ink never dried, and the stories that tried to be told faded into the dark, unwritten. There's a quiet miracle unfolding behind your eyes, one you rarely notice unless something disrupts it. It's the sensation of time as a steady thread, gently unfurling through your thoughts. But here's the secret. That thread isn't real, not in the way you might think. It's not something the universe hands to you. It's something your mind assembles, moment by moment, from broken pieces. You don't passively receive time, you compose it. Your brain doesn't work like a camera, recording every second as it arrives. It works more like an editor, cutting, arranging, interpreting. It chooses which moments to notice, which to remember, and which to discard. It fills in the gaps between snapshots with imagined motion. And from these fragments, your thoughts, your memories, your sensations, it constructs the illusion of flow. Sometimes that illusion breaks. You've likely felt it. That eerie sensation of déjà vu, where a moment feels impossibly familiar, though it can't be. Or the time after a shock or trauma, when everything seems to move too fast or too slow or not at all. Perhaps you've experienced it after waking from a vivid dream, unsure whether minutes or hours have passed. These are reminders that time, as you feel it, is not fixed. It bends under pressure. It skips when startled. It distorts under emotion. And that's not a failure. It's part of how the mind survives. Neuroscience tells us that different parts of your brain handle different kinds of time. Some regions track milliseconds, like the beat in a song. Others store long-term sequences, your childhood memories, the path from morning to evening. Still others help you anticipate future events. But these systems don't always agree. Your experience of time is a negotiation between them, a kind of inner committee deciding how the moment should feel. And so, your continuity, your sense that you have been moving smoothly from yesterday into today, is a story built in real time, a beautiful one, but a story nonetheless. What happens then if the stitching fails? Imagine a mind that receives its moments all at once, like a kaleidoscope of emotion and thought without sequence. You might know what you feel, but not when. You might recognise a face, but not remember how you met. You might experience joy, but without the thread that led to it. And without that thread, would it feel like joy, or just sensation? Certain neurological conditions offer a glimpse. People with anterograde amnesia, unable to form new memories, can live in a kind of eternal now, where nothing sticks. Each conversation is new. Each question has never been asked. The past doesn't vanish. It simply fails to register. Time continues, but it doesn't accumulate. And yet, even in those cases, the person remains aware. They smile. They wonder. They exist. Which tells us something humbling. That consciousness doesn't need time to exist, only to remember. Awareness might arise in an instant, live fully in that instant, and never look back. It's memory that makes us feel continuous, not thought, not feeling, memory. But memory is fragile, it is subjective, and it is always late. Studies have shown that what we experience as now is often a construct, delayed by milliseconds as the brain collects enough data to form a cohesive picture. In other words, even your present is slightly in the past. You're never quite where you think you are in time, and that's okay, because your brain doesn't aim for accuracy. It aims for coherence. It wants the story to make sense. This brings us to a curious thought. If time is stitched together from fragments, could a brain be taught, or evolve, to stitch it differently? Could a being perceive time as overlapping moments, where the beginning and end of an experience arrive together, like the way music feels when you already know the song? Could memory be shaped like a web, not a line? And if you lived like that, where everything was now, but now was wide and soft and unbroken, would you still feel the need to ask what time it was? Or would time become something you carried, not something you watched? We don't yet know how far the brain's perception of time can stretch, but we do know that it's flexible. It can compress years into nostalgia. It can stretch minutes into agony. It can forget entirely or repeat endlessly. It can build time out of silence and silence out of time. And maybe that's the quiet wonder of being human, that in a universe governed by clocks and particles, you can sit quietly on a park bench, feel the warmth of the sun on your face and say, without knowing why, that this moment is long, that this moment matters, not because of what came before or what might follow, but because your mind chose to hold it. You're not a clock. You're the composer of time's music, writing and rewriting its rhythm with every breath. And somewhere in that rhythm, in that soft and imperfect stitching of now to then, you become a self, a story in motion, a mind that not only travels through time, but makes it. Let's take a deep breath and gently step into an idea that feels like fiction, but comes wrapped in quiet seriousness. What if there were a mind, somewhere in the vast landscape of possibility, that did not remember the past but the future? Not a fortune teller or a prophet, but a being whose memory ran in the other direction, for whom what has not yet happened is already known, and what has already happened is lost. It may sound impossible, but from the perspective of physics, time does not come with an inherent direction. Most of the fundamental laws of the universe are time-symmetric, meaning they work the same whether time moves forward or backward. It's only entropy, the statistical tendency of things to get messier, that gives time its apparent arrow. Without that arrow, there's no reason the brain must be wired to store the past instead of the future. The asymmetry is not required by the equations, only by the world we live in. So let's imagine. Not as prediction, but as a poem of possibility. This being, we might call them the inverse rememberer, does not recall where they came from, but they know, with a calm certainty, what is about to happen. Their first kiss, their last words, the exact moment the leaves fall from a certain tree years from now. All of it is already there, not as prophecy, but as memory. To them, the future is familiar. It is the past that arrives in fragments, uncertain, murky, unclaimed. Would such a being feel nostalgia for things they have not yet done? Would they miss someone they haven't yet met? Would they grieve something still waiting to happen? And how would they plan? Planning, as we know it, is built on the unpredictability of what lies ahead. We act in the present to shape a desired future. But if the future is already fixed, if it's already stored in memory, then planning might become more like reenactment, less about change and more about choreography. A dance they already remember, but must still perform. They might not seek to change the future any more than you seek to change your childhood. It already exists in their mind, not as possibility but as record. Would there be free will? It's difficult to say. If they remember the future the way we remember the past, with vivid moments, fading details, emotional traces, then perhaps their choices would feel just as open, just as real. We often act freely even when we know what we'll likely do. The future remembering mind might experience that same paradox in reverse, acting not to change the story but to complete it. And what about emotions? Would love arrive first as heartbreak, remembered from an ending that hasn't yet begun? Would joy carry the shadow of its inevitable fading? Would they know the moment of parting before the moment of meeting? And if so, would that make the connection sweeter or unbearably sad? There's a deep tenderness in imagining such a mind, one that walks backward through the world, collecting beginnings where we collect ends. Perhaps their lullabies speak of arrivals instead of departures. Perhaps their poems begin with the last line and slowly spiral inward. Perhaps the most sacred thing in their culture is the first moment, not because it's new, but because it is the final thing they'll remember. If you knew how your life would unfold, every triumph, every failure, every goodbye, would you live it differently? Or would you live it more fully, knowing that every second had already left its mark? There are echoes of this idea in our world. People sometimes say they had a sense that something was coming, a sudden knowing, a feeling of certainty before a moment even arrived. We call it intuition, or coincidence, or perhaps simply luck. But maybe, just maybe, those moments are glimpses, not of truth, but of how strange time could be if it unravelled just a little differently. In some interpretations of quantum mechanics, especially those involving retrocausality, there are equations that allow future states to influence the present. It doesn't mean messages are being sent back in time, but it suggests that causality might not be as one way as we think, that the boundary between before and after might be more flexible, more participatory, that the universe might be less like a domino line and more like a dance, where each step responds not just to what has come, but to what is coming. In such a universe, a mind that remembers the future might not be impossible. It might simply be rare, like a wildflower growing against the grain of time's wind. And if you ever met such a being, what would you ask? Would you want to know your future? Or would that be too heavy a gift? Would you ask how your story ends? Or would you rather walk toward it unknowing, with all the surprises intact? Or perhaps you'd simply sit with them in silence, letting them remember what you still hope for, letting them smile at things that haven't yet happened, and trusting that, for them, it's already a cherished part of the past. Because time is not always what it seems, and somewhere, perhaps far away, or maybe just on the edge of dream, there may be a mind that wakes up each day not wondering what will happen next, but savouring what's already written on tomorrow's page. And that mind, strange as it may sound, is not so different from yours. You remember, you hope, you grieve, you imagine. And in all those things you're already touching time in more than one direction. Close your eyes for a moment, not to drift away, but to imagine a different kind of stillness, one not tied to night or to dreams, a stillness that has nothing to do with the ticking of a clock or the rising and falling of the sun, a stillness in a mind that does not measure time at all. What would sleep mean in such a place? We often think of sleep as a pause in our daily rhythm, a chance for the body to rest, the brain to organise, and the heart to let go. But at its core, sleep is a temporal function. It regulates cycles, it divides days, it lets memory settle into place, and thoughts arrange themselves along the thread of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Without time, would sleep even exist? In a mind that experiences no before or after, the concept of rest becomes strange. If there is no momentum, nothing to recover from, no sense of duration, then fatigue loses its meaning. Sleep depends on something having passed, and in a timeless mind, nothing has. You might imagine such a brain as one caught in a moment of perfect stillness, not frozen in the dramatic sense, not trapped, but simply not progressing. Like a photograph that thinks, or a flame that does not burn, awareness without duration, a presence that is always on, not because it is alert, but because there is no off. And yet, perhaps even in that static awareness, there would be a kind of softness, a dimming. Not because something ends, but because attention shifts. Because the light of thought narrows. Sleep might not be sleep as we know it, but rather a fluctuation in focus, a sigh rather than a cycle. Would there be dreams? Dreams are narratives. They unfold. They have beginnings, middles and ends, sometimes strange, sometimes looping, but always sequential in feeling. In a timeless brain, a dream could not stretch across hours, but it might still shimmer. A vision not extended in time but layered in thought, like a painting rather than a film, a single, rich image, packed with emotion, standing still and yet full of motion inside. And perhaps such a mind would not know sleep and wake as opposites. Perhaps it would simply flow between intensities of awareness, a wave that neither crests nor crashes, but hovers just before the shoreline, suspended. The kind of rest that doesn't begin or end, because it never needed to. We see hints of this in deep meditation, when the sense of time loosens and minutes feel like seconds, or the reverse, when the boundary between thought and silence becomes porous. When a person emerges from a quiet state unsure how long they have been still, but feeling undeniably refreshed. Something inside us already knows how to drift without clocks. We don't need minutes to find peace. Sometimes we only need space inside our mind. It's also possible that in a timeless mind, the idea of sleep wouldn't just be unnecessary, it might be impossible. If consciousness has no beginning or end, then suspension might never be required. Or maybe it would come in forms we can't imagine. Not cycles of night and day, but fluctuations of attention, or pauses in pattern recognition. Little absences inside the presence, unnoticed by the being experiencing them. And if such a mind existed, not in our universe, but in some other possible one, would it ever long for dreams? Would it wonder what it means to forget? To fall? To awaken? These are tender questions, because even in our time-bound minds we understand the need for pause. Sleep is not simply repair, it is relief from the weight of continuity, from the accumulation of choice, from the echo of unfinished thoughts. It is the place we go not to stop existing, but to let existence soften, to be held, briefly, by nothing in particular. In the absence of time, does anything need softening? Or is stillness the default state? Not rest, but quiet. We often assume that awareness must be active to be real, that thinking must move, but perhaps that's only true because our thoughts are shaped by time's flow. In a timeless mind, perhaps awareness is a field, not a river. No movement, just presence. No need to recover, no need to wait. And yet, even there, the idea of sleep might survive in spirit, not as a cycle, not as a need, but as a gesture, a moment when the lights dim, when the focus turns inward, when the mind, even without a clock, chooses gentleness over clarity. A pause, not from effort but from intention. You might call it sleep, or something quieter still. So if ever you find yourself overwhelmed by the ticking of the world, by alarms and deadlines and the relentless pull of the next thing, remember this. Time is only one way to be. Sleep is not just an answer to fatigue. It is a permission, a surrender, a kindness you offer yourself, regardless of what the universe is doing outside your window. And perhaps deep in some corner of reality, there are minds that never needed that permission, because they were already resting, always, already present, without pace, already whole, without waking. And so, as you lie down tonight, remember that sleep is not about stopping, it is about letting go. Time may carry you forward, but sleep lets you float. And in that floating for a while, you become timeless too. If you close your eyes and picture time, what shape does it take? Perhaps a line, straight, thin, stretching forward without pause. That's how we often describe it. A timeline, a path, a sequence. But listen more closely. Beneath the language of calendars and clocks, there's a quieter pattern. One that speaks not of straightness, but of return. Not of sameness, but of resonance. A shape both old and evolving. A spiral. You've seen it before. In the curve of a seashell, in the swirl of galaxies, in the unfurling of a fern. You've felt it in your own life too. In the way certain emotions return. Not quite as they were, but changed. In the way a memory from childhood can surface years later with new meaning. In the rhythm of seasons, of growth, of learning. Not circles, not repetition, but spirals. In mythologies across the world, time was rarely linear. In ancient Hindu cosmology, the universe moves through great cycles: creation, preservation, destruction, and rebirth. The Maya imagined time as interlocking gears, cycling through vast ages. Even in Western traditions, echoes of the spiral remain, the idea that history repeats itself, but never quite the same way. And physics, for all its clocks and equations, doesn't forbid the spiral either. In some cosmological models, the early universe may have exhibited oscillatory behaviour, expanding and contracting in pulses, like a breath too large to feel. In quantum systems, wave functions evolve with interference patterns that ripple outward. And even in the geometry of space-time, curved by gravity, paths can bend, twist and spiral, especially near rotating black holes or cosmic strings. But beyond the math and the myth, the spiral matters most in your own lived experience, because you are not who you were last year. And yet, you are. The same questions find you again, but they land differently. The same joys arrive, but with deeper echoes. You grow, not away from yourself, but around yourself, layer by layer, year by year, wiser, maybe, or simply more intricate. Time, in this view, is not a hallway. It's a staircase that curves. Each step feels familiar, yet higher than the last. You revisit the same rooms, but the window views have changed. Even healing, emotional, psychological, is spiral-like. You don't recover in a straight line. Old wounds return, grief soften, then ache again, then soften once more. But with each return the experience is different. Softer maybe, sharper sometimes, always evolving. Spiral time gives you permission to not be finished, to return to the same thought, the same question, the same song, without shame. Not because you failed to move on, but because you were never meant to move in just one direction. You might ask, what would a spiral universe feel like? Perhaps history would repeat, but only as a chorus does, each verse new, but echoing the last. Perhaps lives would intersect again and again, but never quite the same way. Perhaps meaning would come not from reaching a destination, but from noticing the deepening pattern in your returns. And perhaps, in such a world, choice would still matter. Because a spiral is not a trap, it is a path with memory. You can revisit a moment but still change what you do with it. You can feel the rhythm returning and still dance to a different beat. Imagine a conversation you've had before, but this time you listen differently. A walk you've taken many times, but this time the light is softer and you are older. The spiral doesn't erase difference, it honours it, and there's comfort in that. Because sometimes we fear we're just going in circles, repeating old patterns, trapped. But the spiral reminds us, you can return to the same point and still have moved forward. You are not stuck, you are orbiting something, an idea, a truth, a part of yourself not yet fully seen. Even the Earth spirals. It doesn't just circle the sun, it moves with the sun, which itself orbits the galaxy. So every year when we return to the same season, the same stars in the sky, we're also somewhere we've never been. The path loops, yes, but never closes. It climbs through space, endlessly new. And maybe that's true of your life as well. So when you find yourself thinking, haven't I been here before? Pause. Not in frustration, but in curiosity. Maybe you have, but maybe you're seeing it with different eyes. Maybe this is not a circle. Maybe it's a spiral. Maybe you are rising. You don't have to be done with something for it to evolve. Growth does not mean never looking back. It means learning how to carry the past with grace. To revisit it, not to relive it, but to understand it better. And that is the quiet gift of the spiral. It lets you hold contradiction, motion and return, change and familiarity. You can be moving and still be near the place you began. And in that closeness, you may find meaning, not in distance, but in depth. Time spirals, and so do you. Imagine a clock, not one ticking forward with steady certainty, but one that moves like breath, forward, then back. Not like rewinding a film, but more like revisiting a memory in slow motion. Not stuck, not broken, just folded. A clock that doesn't count away the present, but circles gently around it, returning now and then to what has already been. Not to undo it, but to touch it again. In physics, there are equations that permit this. General relativity allows for solutions known as closed time-like curves, paths through space-time that loop back on themselves. These are not fantasy or fiction. They arise in serious mathematical models, strange hypothetical geometries involving rotating black holes or exotic matter. They suggest, quietly, that under certain conditions, a particle could travel through space and time and return to its own past. Not just in storybooks, but on paper, inside the mathematics that underpins our understanding of the universe. And yet no one knows whether such loops exist in reality. They are permitted by the math, but perhaps forbidden by nature's deeper logic, by entropy, or by the yet unfinished theory that will one day unite gravity and quantum mechanics. Still, the idea lingers, because it's not just about time travel, it's about how time might fold. You can picture it like a sheet of paper, flat, smooth, with moments arranged like dots in a line. If you fold the sheet, two dots that were far apart can suddenly touch. The past and the present, face to face, not erased, not collapsed, just close again. And what might that feel like? Not like reliving a moment. Not exactly. More like revisiting a room you used to live in. Not to inhabit it again, but to notice something on the windowsill you'd forgotten. To feel the way the light once fell. To bring the person you are now into the place you once were. In mathematics, this feedback structure has surprising implications. Systems with feedback loops, where outputs influence future inputs, can become complex, self-aware, even adaptive. What if time itself was such a system? Not a stream, but a circle of influence. Not cause and effect, but cause affecting cause. Gently, recursively, like a memory influencing a thought, influencing a memory again. It's difficult to picture, but you've already felt it. Have you ever made a decision based on how you imagined you would remember it later? Have you ever shaped the present to match the future you wanted to feel in hindsight? That's not superstition. That's temporal feedback, a loop. Not of particles, but of thought. We are already time travellers of a softer kind. We anticipate our future emotions, we revise our memories, we tell stories in reverse. Our minds, in some quiet way, are already clocks that double back. And in art, in story, in dreams, we build timelines that are anything but straight. We watch films that begin at the end. We read novels that spiral through time, one memory unlocking another. We tell stories around campfires that loop and echo, where what matters is not when something happened, but what it meant. The spiral and the fold are not alien to us. They live in our imaginations, in our regrets, in our wonderings, in the long thoughts we carry just before sleep. So what might a universe be like if time truly folded? Perhaps it would feel like déjà vu, made permanent. Perhaps it would be full of resonances, familiar moments repeating not because of fate, but because time, like fabric, creased itself there. Perhaps you would grow older, then younger, then older again, not in your body, but in your thoughts. Perhaps the stories you lived wouldn't be about progress, but about recognition. And maybe such a universe wouldn't be chaotic or strange at all. Maybe it would feel more like music. Because music doesn't travel in a straight line. It repeats, it loops, it returns to motifs with new texture, new key, new force. It builds forward by folding back. It becomes rich not because it never looks behind, but because it knows how to return. What if time were more like that? What if this moment isn't new, but a theme we've heard before, now playing in a different octave? What if your life contains verses you haven't reached yet, but will recognise instantly when they arrive? It's a tender thought, one that lets go of the fear of linearity, of running out, of never coming back. And so, we arrive at a soft closing of this part of the journey, not a final note, but a fold, a return, not to where we began, but to what we've become. We have spiralled through the idea of time. We've seen it as flow, as stillness, as memory, as light. We've imagined it as vast, as folded, as gone. And now, just before the hush of sleep, we double back, not to repeat, but to rest inside the pattern. Because perhaps time is not just a way to measure change. Perhaps it's a way to become aware of meaning. And perhaps the moments that feel most familiar are not signs of repetition, but invitations to listen again, to touch the shape, not of the hour, but of the echo. It's all right now. There's nothing more you need to understand. No mysteries to solve tonight. You've walked far through thought and space, through strange physics and soft metaphors, through clocks that bend and memories that whisper backward. But now it's time to stop chasing time. Because whether it flows or stands still, whether it exists or emerges, whether it's written into the laws of the cosmos or merely a shadow we cast with our thoughts, what remains quietly and undeniably is change. Things change, you change, the world changes, and it's in that change that you find yourself, again and again. Maybe time is not fundamental. Maybe the future does not yet exist, or maybe it already does. But you feel the difference between morning and night, between the first word of a sentence and the last, between a hand held and a hand released. That difference, that gentle shifting of state, is real, whether or not the clock deserves credit for it. You are made of transitions. Every breath you take is a becoming. Every blink carries you from one moment to the next. Every thought you finish is a thread tied to one just beginning. Even sleep, which seems like an ending, is merely another doorway. One more change in the ongoing current of your being. You're not static. You're a flicker. Not fragile, not vanishing, but radiant, in motion. Like the shimmer of light on water, never the same twice. Like a candle that dances, not in fear of going out, but in celebration of being lit at all. And if you find yourself wondering whether time is real or imagined, that's all right. It's a beautiful question. But the more beautiful truth is this: you feel its presence, not because it imposes itself, but because you respond, you grow, you remember, you hope. A leaf does not need to understand photosynthesis to turn gold in autumn. A child does not need to define growth to outgrow a toy. And you do not need to grasp the nature of time to know that you are no longer who you once were, that some part of you has shifted, quietly, slowly, gracefully, and that is enough. Change is not always grand, most of it is small. A softened thought, a slower heartbeat, a pause between intentions, a moment where you choose stillness over movement. But over time, whatever that word means to you, those small changes become a life, a story, a shape that was not there before. Perhaps that is what time truly is. Not a line, not an arrow, not a ticking mechanism, but a shape you grow into, one breath at a time. You are a flicker in that shape, bright, brief, meaningful, and flickers, though they pass, are never wasted. Even now, as your body begins to settle, and the thoughts begin to blur and slow, you are not disappearing. You are transitioning from awareness into rest, from thought into feeling, from watching the stars to becoming one of them, quietly embedded in the dark. The stars you see out your window, if you're lucky enough to have them tonight, are messages from long ago. They're light, travelling across space, across years and silence and dust, finally reaching your eyes. Each one is a flicker from another time, and yet it arrives here, now in this moment, for you. That's what you are too. A flicker of time, arriving now, shaped by change, gently glowing, and maybe more beautiful because of how brief, how delicate, how impossible you are. You don't need to hold on to this moment. You're not meant to last as you are. You're meant to become, to feel the air shift and to shift with it, to love and then to let go, to imagine and then to sleep. Because whatever time is, illusion, memory, motion, math, you're here, and you're still becoming, still flickering, still unfolding into the next shape you'll be. So rest now, little flicker. You've changed enough for today. Let the stars take the watch. Let the breath carry you. Let time, whatever it is, fall away for a while. You've come so far, across theories and timelines, spirals and stars, slow memories and sudden shifts. You've listened to the clock stretch, loop, pause, and dissolve. And now, as your body settles into the softness of night, there's one last idea to offer. Not a concept, really, but a quiet invitation. What if the truest part of you isn't measured by seconds or shaped by calendars? What if there is a place inside you, beneath the ticking, beneath the names for things, where the clock cannot follow? We spend so much of our lives tethered to time, schedules, alarms, countdowns, anniversaries. The world is full of reminders that something is passing, ending, approaching. But you're not made of deadlines. You're not a series of appointments. You're not the blinking numbers on a screen. You are a being in motion, a ripple, a rhythm, a moment of consciousness becoming something else. And whatever time may be it real, emergent, fragmented, or folded, it has never truly captured you. Because you're not made by the passage of time. You're made by the act of changing. Time is just the name we give to that change, a label for the invisible dance between who you were and who you are still becoming. When you close your eyes, you don't cease to exist. You don't leave the world. You drift inward into a landscape where hours don't pass in straight lines, where thoughts echo, images stretch, and the self unravels just enough to let go. In dreams, time loses its grip. You might live a lifetime in a single breath, or float through a single moment that lasts forever. The rules bend, not because your mind is broken, but because it is free. Free to remember without sequence. free to feel without urgency, free to simply be, without rushing toward what comes next. And that freedom, that gentle space beyond the reach of clocks, is still with you now. It's in the hush between thoughts, in the slow exhale, in the way your heartbeat softens when no one is asking anything of you. It's in the way your eyes begin to drift, not from boredom but from trust. The trust that the world will keep turning without your effort, that you can rest and still belong. You're not required to be productive right now. You're not expected to understand everything. You're allowed to simply drift. Let your mind move without purpose. Let images float through like birds that don't need naming. Let the ceiling become sky, the bed become sea, and your body become something lighter than thought. Because drifting is not escape, it is return. To the part of you that was never shaped by time, to the awareness that does not age, to the quiet pulse beneath all motion, the pulse that says, I am still here. I do not need to measure to matter. So many things in the universe unfold with no clock to guide them. A star is born not by schedule, but by gathering. A black hole doesn't count seconds as it waits. A galaxy doesn't know what time it is. And yet everything still moves, still breathes, still transforms. You too can move without measuring. You too can transform without rushing. The story of your life is not written in minutes. It's written in wonder and curiosity, in the way you look at something ordinary and feel something extraordinary stir inside. It's written in the breath you just took, in the way you feel right now, tired maybe, quiet, a little full, a little empty, a little ready to let the edges blur. You don't need to say goodbye to time. You only need to let it step back for a while. Let the clock wait outside the door. Let the universe turn without you needing to turn with it. Let the rhythm slow. You are not late. You are not early. You are here. And in this moment, the most important thing you can do is rest. Let the metaphors fade. Let the questions soften. Let the idea of time itself melt like a candle left burning too long. Not snuffed out, not broken, just surrendered. Because time, for all its complexity, can be quieted. It cannot follow you here. This place, this soft dark between words, this slow warmth between breaths, is yours. You are safe. You are loved. You are more than time. So drift now, not toward a destination, not away from anything, but into yourself. Sleep well, little flicker, little spiral, little thoughts in the shape of a person. The cosmos is still turning, and it will be here when you wake.